In this episode, I'm talking to James Wedmore about spirituality in business, what reality actually is, and how to shift your reality to grow in life and in business. So stay tuned. Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. All right, welcome back to another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm really excited for today. We've had Jim Fortin on the podcast, and with that interview, I talked about there's been a couple people in my journey of being an entrepreneur that have had really massive impact. Jim being one of them. Our guest today is another one. Today's guest is James Wedmore, who is the founder and host of Mind Your Business podcast and Business by Design. And I've known James for, 8 years or so. We've been business partners, and really like where I've learned to launch, where I've learned to basically market and grow an online business came from being partners with James. But what's been really unique and really special for me is the friendship we've developed from there, where we've both been growing from a spiritual standpoint. What we view as real, not real, what we view as reality has all changed. We both work with Jim's brother-in-law. And over the last couple of years, it's been really fun watching each other's business grow, because James and I have been going through the exact same things in business and life and mirroring each other almost for the last 2 years, where like I'll call him for something or advice on something. He's like, I'm going through the exact same thing right now. And it's just nuts. So it's really an honor for me to be able to have him on the podcast. And James, welcome. I'm glad you're here, man.
Hey, buddy. Thanks for having me. And hey, congrats on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. It's really exciting. I'm still getting used to this whole like talking for an hour thing, but no, it's good.
It is. It feels a little weightlessness at first. You know,
Yeah.
You're kind of like, it's not like a video where it's kind of like, all right, and scene, cut.
Yeah, exactly.
Keep going.
I'm enjoying it though. It's been awesome, and I'm really glad to have you here. I have to tell you a quick story though, and I want you to tell everyone kind of what you do and all of that stuff. But when we had Rick, I had interviewed Rick Mulready a little bit ago, and we started talking about the time when I met you and when I met Rick. It was at the exact same time. Did you remember that? I came to your house when we first started Local Video Academy, and you're like, this guy has been like messaging me and emailing me about coaching, and I don't want to do it. It was Rick.
That was Rick.
You remember that?
Yeah, that was a real interesting time period, because like it was almost didn't meet. You know, my assistant was like, you need to meet this guy. I don't care what you say. I put it in your calendar.
Yeah.
And met at the Starbucks. And it was at the same time that someone named Rick, and we joke about the story today, where he was courting me basically, like whatever. And yeah, at the same time, I was like, okay, fine. And hey, sometimes saying yes to those things that you wouldn't normally have said yes, they turn out pretty well. So
yeah.
I'm glad
it's really cool. And I want you to tell people kind of like, what you do and where you started. And we'll get to there in a second. But when we first met, we were both kind of like teaching YouTube and doing that stuff. And we sat down at the coffee shop, and the intention was a 15-minute meeting. And we ended up sitting there for like 2 hours and going through all this like geeky YouTube stuff. Well, Rick told me right at the same time, he reached out to Amy Porterfield the exact same way I reached out to you. They went for coffee for 15 minutes, and then they talked for two hours at the exact same time. And then she's actually the one that connected Rick over to you, which was kind of interesting. It's always funny how things work out. But before we get any further into the interview, I would love for you to tell people a little bit about what you do and kind of how you got started with your online business.
Yeah. And I'll try to get the shortest version possible. About 14 years ago, I had an idea. I was a bartender. I graduated college, and I, took that degree and became a day shift bartender at On the Border, which is like the Mexican version of Chili's. So I was pouring pre-made margaritas and beers with my college degree that my parents paid like $40,000 a year for.
Which, by the way, one of the things in this podcast is I'm so against sending your kids to college when they don't actually know what they want to do. And
yeah, I would say like, I'm kind of in that middle spot. I was like, listen, if someone was asking me, or, if I ever have kids, I would say, go to college, but know what you're signing up for. This is like the 4 years of your life where you get to experience all the perks of being an adult with none of the responsibilities.
It is
and,
true.
I had a great time. Did I need to do it in order to advance my career? What I'd been told my entire life, that you go to college so you can get a good job. It's like, but what if I don't want a job, right? So I didn't want a job. I didn't want a career. I didn't want to go down that path. So I became a bartender in the meantime. And I had this idea planted in my head that was just this random thought one day that I said, what if I could make more money teaching people how to bartend than actually bartending? And that was kind of this challenge I set for myself. And I sat down for like 3 months straight and wrote a 222-page book called Bartend for Profit, teaching everything I knew about how to bartend, pour drinks, mixology, the art of mixology, even how to increase your tips and stuff like that. And I made my very first sale from someone from San Antonio, Texas on April 18th,
Still
2000.
remember it.
Of course you remember it. You always remember your first sale, because that was the moment that everything changes. That's the moment you go, well, if I could do this once, I could do it again. And if I could do it again, I could do this for as long as I want. And that set that journey off. And a lot of struggles. We could spend hours talking about all the mistakes I've made and all the setbacks, all the failures. And I really, today, anybody who already knows me coming to this episode, James Wedmore, right? Because you always hear that person that says that. I say, look, the only thing that I have is I'm more willing to make more mistakes than most people.
Yeah.
Because I've learned that through those mistakes I learn, and you will as well. So that progressed over a few years into, as you mentioned, building a brand, teaching YouTube. So by about 2013, by about the time I met Mr. Lucero, I had $1 million+ a year business selling a $97 online course. I was surfing for half the day and working a couple hours and making a video once a week. I was like, this is the dream. Yeah. And it was people like Rick, and it was people like Brandon that kept coming to me, and they're like, how the F are you doing what you're doing the way that you're doing it? And that was when I finally said, okay, I'm going to stop teaching YouTube. I'm going to stop teaching video. I want to teach people how I built this. And when I got down to it, so much of it is like, there's the right strategy and the right method, 100%. What's the plan? What's the process? The 3D action-oriented steps. But if I had to be truly honest and really truly make the deepest impact I could with people, I had to start by saying, so much of what got me here was what happened within me, inside of me, the transformations that happened within. And I know Jim says it, I know you say it, and I say it as many times as I can, is that your business is a reflection of you. Yeah. And so if you want to grow your business, it really starts with growing you. And so today, that's how I help people. I started it with the podcast, just sharing about, same things that you're talking about is how I started to grow from the inside out, and how that reflects into the growth of my business. You just think about it. How many decisions we have to make a day? Who's making those decisions? From what perspective are you making those decisions? We have to deal with problems and setbacks, and look at the times that we're in right now, right? And you have to be willing to, if you say yes to an entrepreneur, you're also saying yes to all of that. It's like everyone wants the Disney fairy tale happily ever after, and ironically, what an entrepreneur does is get paid to solve problems, but so many are not willing to deal with the problems that are in their own business.
So funny. Well, it's funny too, like being on this whole entrepreneurial journey, and even the spiritual journey, which we'll get a little deeper into this podcast. I actually enjoy the problems. Like I enjoy the struggles, and I view struggles and problems as uncomfortability without any other attachment to it now. And I'm always looking for the lessons that I'm going to get, because where I'm at today would not be here or not exist had the biggest problems or quote unquote like failures in my life happen. Like it just wouldn't exist. There's just no way I wouldn't be here at all. So I've learned to kind of adapt to that.
Brandon, I know it's your podcast, but I really think we could just end it here. And that would be one of the most valuable things that your listeners could get right now, because I could not agree more. And that's what I was saying about all the mistakes I've made is that every single, and Jim's brother-in-law says this, and it resonates with me so much, is that pain is a blessing.
It is.
Because pain forces you to finally pay attention. You've heard people say that success is a crappy teacher, because when things are working, you're not looking for what's not working.
Yeah.
You're not looking to problem solve. You're not looking to think differently. You're not looking to shift your perspective or see something in a new way. It's when things aren't that you stop, you slow down, you pause, and you go deep. You go within, you say, we got to figure this out.
Yeah.
And it's at those moments that we have the opportunity for the biggest breakthroughs. And the thing is we've been told this. You read any book dating all the way back to Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, which is like 100 years old now. We've heard this a million times. When are we going to start doing it? Yeah. And you'll know you're doing it when you're saying the same thing that Brandon is saying, which is that today I say problem, bring it on. I welcome it. I enjoy it. We should all change our label today to professional problem solver. And we should be passionately in love with that title, because that's what you do. Yeah. You get paid to solve problems, and you can't be in your own business and expect there to not be problems.
Yeah, 100%. Well, it's not even outside of business, just life in general, And
everything.
Yeah. Well, the other reason why it's such a gift, and I love that you use that word, is that the contrast it gives makes the high moments so much more enjoyable. Like, they have to coexist in order for the high enjoyment. If everything was good all the time, no problems, that would just be this new normal, and you'd be in living a very dull reality. So having the contrast, having those failures, having those low moments gives the contrast, which just makes life so much more enjoyable. And that's why I've learned to love it.
And we know this is true because, as a movie buff, and I try and bring movie references and metaphors into every one of my conversations, the worst movie you could ever watch is like a happy movie that has no conflict.
Yeah.
Like happy credits, right? And the movies that are predictable. Mm-hmm. How many times have you left a movie or seen some scathing IMDb review on a movie? You're like, it was so predictable. Yet that's what we want our life to be. We want it to be happy, perfect, no conflict, and predictable. That's not what we want. That is not what we came here to do, to experience. We came to experience a full range of emotions and uncertainty and new things that we couldn't possibly plan for or predict for.
Yeah.
And when you start like inviting that into your life and being okay with it, it's kind of like going down the big drop on a roller coaster and just throwing your hands up.
Yeah.
Life just gets really juicy and fun,
Yeah, 100%. So we've already gone like way in the direction that I wanted to go, but I want to backtrack a little bit. I want to backtrack to when we first had met, to give a little bit more context of where the story, or not story, but I guess interview is kind of going. So I was at a place in business, and I was doing YouTube videos the same time you were doing YouTube videos. And I had reached out because we were doing like a service beyond all of it. And I wasn't making the business work. I reached out, we met for coffee, and you gave me this business plan. You said, here's why the service you're offering doesn't work. And to me at the time, it seemed ludicrous or ridiculous that you're telling me these prices. Like, I think I was charging $100 a video. You said charge $2,000. And then I wasn't charging any recurring, and you said charge $400 a month recurring. Well, I had so much trust in you at that moment. I was like, well, if James is telling me that it's true, then people will pay that. And then you told me, if you can make that business model work, we can partner on a product and we can go and sell it. And I was so motivated that I think like the next day I went and sold the video for $1,000 to $200.
And you texted me, and I'm gotta say, I don't know, and don't. I mean, this is just me kind of being the jerk that I was, but like, I was very introverted, very like not, in my own little bubble, not connecting with anybody. So that was like very out of the blue for me to connect with someone. But I think it was because you texted me so fast with a result that I was like, who is this guy?
Yeah.
I don't know how many times I've had those stupid lunches or coffee. Well, can I pick your brain? And you tell someone exactly what to do that they're not doing, and you never hear from them ever again. They never do any of it. And that's the difference,
Yeah.
I was like blown away, impressed. Like, you'd already closed the deal, got the reoccurring. I was like, damn.
Well, yeah. And then 6 months later, I think we were doing like 14 grand a month or something like that. And then we started to develop Local Video Academy. But what I find really funny is like a couple of years later, I was like, did you know that model was going to work? You're like, I had no idea if it was going to work.
I just knew it was better than what you were already doing, which wasn't working. Like, what did you have to lose? Right. Yeah. I'm like, cause I remember when we got to the core of what you were going through, you had this great offer.
Yeah.
It's too great. Because you said, well, the problem is, I'm like, that's amazing. And you're like, well, here's the problem. It's not enough. I'm not making enough money and I can't take on any more clients.
Right. Yep.
And I'm like, well, the model's broken.
Yep.
Because that just can't work. You need more clients in order to make the money, but you don't have any more time left. We got to do something about that.
Yeah.
So he raised his prices, kind of tweaked the offer a bit and added the reoccurring revenue component. Now you're working with less clients, providing better value and making more money. Like,
yeah.
That's right.
It solved everything. So I remember, we started to develop the product, Local Video Academy, which went on to go do, millions of dollars in sales. And it really was like kind of like the first catalyst for me of learning this whole, I was selling some products, but I wasn't really, most of our revenue was from the service. And so going through that process with you, really kind of like firsthand taught me how to launch and sell products and programs online. But I remember when we came down one time, and I believe I told you this story. Back then I was way into psychics, and I still am, like a little bit, but not so. After working with Jim's brother-in-law, not as much, but back then it was always like getting readings done and doing all this stuff. And it was fun. It was interesting. But I remember one time this person told me, just like, cause I was like ready to give up in business. I was like 2 years in, working at night, just trying whatever, like building websites, doing so much stuff. And they said, there's this guy with brown hair that's going to come into your life. They actually said Greek looking is what they said.
Totally. Mykonos.
And they were so right. So Greek. But they said they will change. They're going to change everything. Like, you guys will work on this project. It'll change. It'll be like the catalyst, the change of everything. Well, I remember when we finally met, we were down there. I think Michael Alanis was there at the house too. And I just like that, a reminder of that, I guess a download or a hit, whatever you want to call it. It's like, boom, I was like, that's what they're talking about. I just knew it, but I was so afraid to tell you. I'm like, oh, I'm like, get readings done and he's going to think I'm weird and blah, 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 blah. And I really want this thing to go. I don't want him to think I'm weird. I was really in a lot of the fears that I used to be in, but I told Michael the story and Michael's like, oh, James would love that. And then I finally told you, and we talked did this big long walk down PCH to start, and we talked psychics, readings, like all this stuff. And I was like, this guy, like, this is my people. And ever since then, we've just been growing and growing and growing. And we've really both brought spirituality into our business. But I think people either like take the wrong misconception of what spirituality is, or they're really like more new age with it, where they just have tons of crystals everywhere without knowing the intention of the crystal or why they have it, just because it's more popularized. But I'm curious of what your interpretation or how you use spirituality in your business today to help grow, because I've seen you go from like 1 million then to 2 million to 3 to all the way up to like, I think you guys are at 10 million or something a year now.
Well, yeah, the cool thing is we could have done the 10 million last year, but we shut down one of our programs just to kind of pull back and, have more my own personal bandwidth. We had another mastermind we were running, but yeah, we went from 2 to 3 and then 3 to 9.25 in 18 months, which is pretty
crazy.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And it's, I'm actually, what it is I've hidden away a secret marketing strategy that no one else knows. And I'm finally ready to reveal it to you.
And the link will be in the show note. My affiliate link will be in the show notes.
Yeah. And that's what's kind of silly, is that like, that's what we all tend to think.
Yeah.
It's just, you're just missing that secret. And I do actually say there is a secret. But the secret is you, and I know that sounds kind of cheesy and hallmarky. But so this has been a really interesting journey for me, because I started a business because I wanted to make money. I have absolutely no shame in that, in saying that. I wanted to make a lot of money. I just had fantasies of me like money spewing out of my computer screen like an ATM, and I'm like throwing dollars at the club, is that what the kids do, right?
Yeah.
They just,
it's what I do.
Popping bottles, whatever. That's how I got started. I was like so motivated by money.
Yeah.
I wanted to be rich, all that type of stuff. And my parents blessed me with their perfect demonstration of being the hardest working people I've ever met. So I just said, okay, I'm motivated and I'm going to work my arse off. And that's where I struggled for 4 years straight. Just burnout. I got addicted to Adderall, which...
Oh, you did? I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. I was 220 something pounds. I was a little chubby, and I started popping 20 to 40 milligrams of Adderall a day. I dropped down to my lowest. I was 144. I was a skeleton, like eyeballs popping out. I'd eat one meal a day. I'd lost all of my friends. I would roll out of bed, pop the pill, and work until about 1 or 2 in the morning, go to bed, do it all over again, 7 days a week.
Was this while you're doing the bartending program?
Yeah. Okay. I was trying to make the bartending thing work. I was trying to do other stuff. Like, again, just like you, like I was in like, I was building websites for people. I was doing SEO for, I was like doing everything I could to try and make something work. Right. And I was working so damn hard. So I was given this paradigm of that my dad was so good at teaching me that he has mastered in his life. You got to work hard to be successful. And Brandon, I worked harder than anybody. Yeah. I mean, my health, like my friends, everything, I worked to the bone.
Yeah.
And had nothing to show for it in 4 years.
Yeah.
And I won't go into the whole story of how and whatnot, but I started getting introduced to things that were like they just kept popping into my sphere. And I look back now and like life is just this beautiful, it's got you played and it knows what it's doing and you can't see it, but there were all these little Easter eggs and hints and like, hello, pay attention, James, all along the way. And I was smart enough to pay attention to some of them. And so I started going down what people call and label as spirituality, which, we have to remember is a man-made construct. Like that's just a label some person said.
Yeah.
And then you also got to be careful because then you got this whole thing of spiritual ego.
Yeah.
There's brands like Spiritual AF, right? I mean, it's a style now. It's like, are you a hipster or are you a spiritual gangster, right? Like it's a thing now. But then there's this, spiritual ego. People saying that's not spiritual. And this is. Right? I get to decide what's spiritual and what's not. But even the word spirituality is not spiritual. It's just some man-made word.
Right.
But we use it to help talk about this conversation. So what I'm getting at is that drive and motivation for money led me to these topics and things because I saw it as a means to the end.
Yeah.
And that's why I love business. That's why I love entrepreneurship, because entrepreneurship ends up being this vehicle that is the means to an end of personal growth and evolution. Like, because the motivation is there for so many people. And then in that process, almost all of us, like as a rite of passage, we have to flip it.
Yeah.
We have to have this come to Jesus moment where we're like, is it really about the money and the car and impressing my brother-in-law and having the trips and all these things? What am I really doing? And just digging deep.
The ego. Yeah.
Exactly. And shedding layers of that and getting to who you really are.
Yeah.
And learning more about who you really are and working from that place. And that's full circle. What we're talking about is the pain being the blessing.
Yeah.
Is that it's like the money becomes this carrot that dangles in front of you when people are kind of like from the outside, like, yes, I'm going to go after that. And it's kind of like, wow, it becomes this journey where you get to discover so much more about who you are and grow so much in the process. So I started getting hints of that. And it was as soon as I started diving into this world, and there's so many things like, yes, I watched the movie The Secret back in 2006 when it came out, thought it was garbage. My mom and sister were like handing me all these like weird woo-woo spiritual books, garbage. Then my girlfriend at the time starts doing these Reiki sessions on me. And I know you're familiar with Reiki. And it was just like the weirdest thing. I had a lot of anger. I had a lot of angst. I had a lot of frustration. I was like, why the earth isn't this working? I was such a different person. Yeah. And I remember one night she comes to my house because I'm still working. It's 8:30 at night. I'd skipped dinner and she comes over and she'd already become a Reiki master at the time. I had no idea what this stuff was. And I was in full on rage because something, that moment you have where you build something and then it doesn't save and you just wasted like hours of your life.
Yes.
Oh, I was in that moment. And she comes and she takes her hand and she puts it on my back, like right the back of where your heart is. And it was just the weirdest thing I'd never experienced before in my life. It was like the anger melted away and I couldn't explain it. And I was just it's like I tried to stay. I was like fighting for that anger. I was trying to be angry. I was angry that I wasn't angry and I couldn't.
Yeah.
And all that was left was like this like love and peace and just like chill out, man. And I was just like, what are you doing to me? Why is this happening? And it was just the weirdest feeling. And so she started doing sessions on me, and then I started doing Reiki. And it was as soon as I started doing Reiki that things like shifted, and it was so bizarre. And I'm very scientific and very evidence-based. So I'd like do a class and I'd do this work. And then all of a sudden, like there'd be money in the bank account or sales or like more audience or more list. And I was starting to go, wait a second. I wasn't working as much. I wasn't working as hard. I wasn't pushing. I wasn't doing this 3D go, hustle, grind, square peg, round hole. I was doing the opposite. And it's really is like, it's this like beautiful metaphor of the Chinese finger cuffs, right? When we're in the finger cuffs, you remember those as a kid, we're trying to get out of them, we pull out. And then as soon as we start going in, it's like, that's when things were unlocking for me.
Yeah.
And that really just set off on a journey. And, and the funny thing is like, we can sit there and look back to where we were when we first held hands walking down that sidewalk, talking about all our things. And we can look back and say, so young, so naive. I was only 5 years ago. And Brandon, probably 5 years from now, we're going to go back and we're going to listen to this. And it's like, those dummies.
They knew nothing.
They knew nothing.
Yeah.
And that's what it's like. It's like every day I look back at the version I was the day before. And I was like, man, look how far you've come.
You have to, as a necessity to grow your business. Like when I started my business, I never knew or guessed or had any idea that the growth of your business will be a direct correlation to the growth of you as a person. What do we perceive as a problem? How do we respond to problems? How do we treat other people? What are we vibrating? What's the frequency that we're at? I mean, and we'll talk, I wanted to talk about this a little bit later, but we'll even talk about like, how do we view our reality? How does that affect our business as well? And the way I like to kind of like phrase this or position this is basically like every single business owner has to shift their current reality in some way in order to grow their business. And even if the people, like sometimes I watch Shark Tank and I listen to Mark Cuban and he's just so like, there's no such thing as power of attraction manifested. Like he's just so, I need hard fact, evidence, science, whatever. He's still doing a lot of the concepts that we're talking about, like who he was when he started, the way he viewed the world, AKA his reality, is not the same as it is now. And if we can tap into changing your reality, your perception of the world, you can actually have accelerated growth in your business. Would you agree to that?
100%. And let's talk about that. Just the Mark Cuban example is so funny because you can't have, I just laugh at this. You cannot have an argument with anybody about these things like law of attraction. Because what we're saying with law of attraction, and basically where I'm at is that your thoughts create your reality.
Yeah.
And it's this idea of living from the inside out. You create it twice, first in your mind, and then therefore it gets created second out in the 3D world.
Yeah.
So what is Mark Cuban creating as his reality when he so confidently declares there is no such thing as this? He will see no evidence of it because that's what he's creating. And so it must be true. And even that, I mean, like, that's the joke is like, well, do you see no evidence of it? Yes, I see. Great. Then that's the evidence.
Yeah.
Because what you are declaring and what you are creating in your mind and what you are saying and what you believe becomes what you reflect out in the world.
Yeah.
And that's, even neuroscience tells us this, that your brain doesn't match your beliefs to fit the life and reality out there. No, it matches what you experience as life as the byproduct of the beliefs going on already in here.
Well, yeah. And that's why two people can go through the exact same scenario, but interpret it two completely different ways.
Completely different ways.
And that's why I'm one of my pet peeves is complaining. Like I can't stand complaining. And if
he has to complain about complaining.
The only thing I like complaining about are complainers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I do it all the time.
but basically what it is just, it's an interpretation that's going to create a reality where you're suffering in some way. And I just don't understand why people would want to do that. And I get they're not aware of it, but now as you listen to this podcast and as you grow a business, you can start to see these little things that James and I are talking about where the thoughts that you have will literally shift the way you perceive the world. And if you're perceiving the world in a way that's not going to help you grow your business, then you have to look at the interpretations and the way your mind works, aka the way you see the world, right? Would you agree with that?
Yes. And I think why people complain and why this happens, and we all still do it because we still have humanness, but part of this path and spirituality, as we just to use that word and label it, for me is, it's getting to discover more of who you truly are. And everybody should be doing that. And what you begin to discover is that, I don't know if it's, let's just call it a lie, is that one of the biggest lies that you've been told is that you are not infinitely powerful. Most people do not grow up. And I know we have a few things like, when mom says as a kid, like, you can do anything you set your mind to,
yeah,
but that's about it, right? It's like a Hallmark card. But when you begin to wake up to discover for yourself how powerful you truly are and how powerful your thoughts are, you wouldn't spend as much time complaining as you do.
Yeah.
Because when you are in a complainer mode, yes, we can say that's like victim mode, but another way to say it is you're denying your creative abilities. You're denying your power when you complain. You're saying this somebody else did this, not me. I didn't create this, somebody else did. So we are denying our birthright as a powerful creator. We're saying we're not that thing. And guess what? That's what you're creating.
Yeah.
When you
100%.
feel like you're ineffective at creating something, that's what you created yourself to be. If you feel like a failure, that's what you created yourself to be. That's just the effing evidence of how powerful you are. And that's a really hard thing for people, a real big pill for people to swallow, is like, you got to take a good, hard, honest look at your life at some point or another. That's that come to Jesus like moment for people, is look at everything in your life, the bank account, your relationships, your health, your habits, the results you have, the audience you have, all that. And when you can take full responsibility for that and say that that is all there in your present reality because you created that, whether consciously or unconsciously, we start to get our power back. We start to acknowledge just how powerful we are. And when we do that, a lot of people don't like that. A lot of people are really not ready for that. They're like, don't you tell me that I'm responsible. Someone rear-ended me yesterday. Don't you tell me that that's my fault.
Yeah.
And it's not about fault or blame, but who you can't deny your role that you played in that. Who chose to be in their car at that moment in time, in that lane, going that speed, that direction, probably while twiddling on your phone. You shouldn't be driving and being on your phone, right? You did. And when we start to own that, I think we get a lot of our power back.
Yeah.
And then we can say, great, so what else can I create?
Well, when you get your power back, you're just not at the mercy of circumstance. And when you're not at the mercy of circumstance, you can start to create literally anything you want. And it's so funny too, is every entrepreneur that I know, especially the ones in our space, all have learned to take full responsibility for everything. Even like if my team knows this, like if my team does something and it was a mistake on a client or whatever like that, I'm going to the client and I'm not blaming my team. It's my responsibility. It's my business. It's and when you can take full responsibility for things, it gives you full, complete power to create anything that you want in this world. So
100%.
Do you have a moment where all of this kind of like hit you? We were kind of like, because you keep mentioning like this awakening or this like come to Jesus moment. Do you have a come to Jesus moment or awakening that you can like pinpoint, or has this been more of like an evolution for you?
I would say it's more of an evolution. I do have a specific time where things really like accelerated for me, a couple of those moments, but it's like the way I talk about it a lot is a lot of the stuff we're talking about is really invisible to us.
Uh-huh.
When Brandon talks about circumstance, people don't say, oh, that's just this circumstance. And the circumstance is something you've created. You created that. Now create again, right? You created that from the past. You want something different, create something different. We don't really walk around like that. We just kind of say, this is how it is. This is reality. This is fixed and I'm stuck. And we do that, at least as a guy, or at least myself, like contextually in different areas. So that's what I was finding. I was like, I could start getting really good at this in certain areas of my life and then not so much in others. Right. It's like, man, now I'm doing this great in business, but like, why is it for some reason not applied to my relationship?
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't like this, overnight instant anything. I think it's day by day, and you have these moments of, whoa, I see how I created this.
Yeah.
I see the role I played in this, and look at how much I'm feeding it. Look at how much my energy I continue to give to this to perpetuate it.
Yeah.
Okay, so what else? What do I not want? And I think so much of it is just continue to go down my journey is like comes back to mindfulness and emotions. I think it's really fascinating. It's like I love that we get to have these conversations because look at my audience. I talk about this stuff all the time.
Yeah.
It's 90%, 80%, somewhere in between there, female.
Yeah.
And most dudes don't want to have this conversation, and it really bums me out because.
Well, why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's two reasons. First of all, there's the whole societal like construct of like, men aren't supposed to feel, emotions are weak and feminine. There's all of that type of stuff, right? I think the second thing too is that men are predominantly in a more masculine energy. And so they're seeking out more masculine energy. And part of masculine energy is the action, right? Action, taking that action is a masculine energetic type way of being, where the feminine is more about opening up and allowing and receiving. And so that was like that whole journey for me. It was 4 years of just 100% masculine, adrenaline willpower.
Yeah.
And it was as soon as I started to find a blend of both. We're not talking about being a man or a woman or anything like that. We both are made up of a masculine and a feminine energy. There are times that we all need to push and take that action and make that call or, do that thing, take what's yours, Yep. And there's times that we have to like allow and trust and surrender. And it was when I started to find my own balance, that's when things opened up for me. And so I think you hear a lot of guys, I just listen and they're like, just tell me what to do.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, you
give
want
me the strategy.
Just give me the strategy and give me the steps. Like, you really think there's a dearth of strategies on the internet? That's not your problem, right? There's no shortage of that. So,
well, for it to discredit that belief, basically, it's like if there was, there's a reason why I can give one strategy to 100 people and we're going to get 100 different results because it's not the strategy. It's the person you're being, or there's a million different reasons. But you said something really interesting. You said it's the society norm of men supposed to be like this tough, ego, action taking type of person. I want to talk a little bit about society norms or social constructs or something, or even just beliefs that people have taken on as their own to form their current version of reality. Yep. And how understanding this concept can literally make or break your business. And so just to give a little bit of context, I remember when I first started working with Jim's brother-in-law and doing the candle work and doing a lot of that stuff, like I would, and I don't know I'm assuming your experience is similar, but doing the candle work, I basically would wake up and have these like aha moments. Kind of what I always say is there's a difference between knowledge and knowing, which is also what he says. Knowing is like you learn through experience, which means you literally know how to do it. You don't learn to ride a bike by reading a book. You learn to ride a bike by doing it. Well, I would wake up from these dreams and I would have the knowing of things without having to physically go through the experience here in this physical plane. Like I would either be doing it in dream time and I'm gifted the knowing of certain things. And one of those things was basically how humans form their version of reality. And I remember walking down the sidewalk by my house and just hitting me and going, oh my God, everything is an illusion. Yeah. Nothing is real. And when you operate from that place, just explosion of growth happens. Yep. So from all the entrepreneurs that you worked with and all the experiences that you have had, how do you use this kind of concept? How do you explain this to people, and how do you use it personally inside your business to grow?
Gosh, I love you sharing just the context like behind that. And what came up for me first before I answer the question is like, when you say knowing and it hit you like that, what came up for me is like, was it knowing or was it remembering?
Ooh.
Yeah. I don't know. It's like we're just remembering more of what we already know. Right. So
that's a great point.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had those same moments where you just go, all of it, none of it's real. That was such a satisfying place for me to get to, because I was always very contrarian by nature. I was very stubborn by nature.
Yeah.
I have all these stories of like growing up and just like questioning everything. And I even talk about like the employee mindset. It's just like everyone is trained in society to think like an employee. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that an employee is bad or anything, but it's like learning how to play football, the rules of football, so you can play soccer,
Yeah.
or basketball, right? It's just like, it doesn't work. And so,
well, it sounds like what you're saying is so basically, I'll give my interpretation, like a little deeper explanation of what I'm talking about is, because it sounds like what you're saying is it might be beneficial to really look at what we've learned and start unlearning a lot of that in order to be successful inside of business.
Even just to begin questioning it.
Yeah.
Just begin questioning it. For example, when I say something like that to someone like there is no, truth. Everything is a belief.
Yeah.
And I can say, like, for example, is the sky blue? Right. And that's like my favorite little example to use is like, yes, of course, that's a fact. Okay. So what about at nighttime? What about at sunset? How do we even know who decided what blue is? And how do you know I see different blue than you?
Yeah.
How do you know that I have a completely different, I don't know, resonance of my eyeballs, that I interpret blue differently than you do? So how do we all agree that blue is blue, right? So I just began questioning all these things. And even something as simple as the sky is blue. It's not blue. It's just maybe right now in this moment, but when it's overcast, it's gray, Yeah. And what people do, and I hear it myself, and you can hear it in the language of others, because we have to filter out, I mean, this is all like neuroscience and really fascinating stuff, because we have to filter out so much of the world around us. I mean, there's so much coming in that the conscious mind can't receive everything going on, right? Like right now, you got this little camera thing moving behind you. You got your team, and there's all this stuff while you're trying to concentrate and stay present on this interview. So the brain is constantly in a deletion process.
Yeah.
So it's deleting and distorting so much of what's coming in. And so people just make these like bold-faced lies, generalizations.
But they don't know they're lies.
Exactly.
And that's the trap.
Yes, it doesn't feel like a lie. You experience it as this is the way it is. And if you just started to take a look at that, these things that, we argue for these, whether they're limitations or these things that we say, this is how the world is. And that's a part of us, I think, that craves so much like certainty. We need this certainty. We need to know why things are, why you are the way you are, and why this is the way it is. And so we just like create it as a solid.
Yeah.
And then we just decide, okay, that's how this thing is. And I don't ever have to reevaluate that again. These people are bad, or this is good, or everybody does this, or nobody does that. And people live their whole life by these generalizations.
Yeah.
We all do it. I'm not exempt from this. I catch myself in it all the time.
I mean, even though I'm aware of it, I obviously do it all the time too, but it starts as like kids. Just for those of you who want a little further explanation, this is kind of like how I kind of view it, and how when it hit me walking down the street, this is like, oh my God, everything is an illusion, is that when we're a little kid, our mom and dad are going to tell us we need to go to school and be successful. Then we might like go out and have an experience that then teaches us something is a certain way. We might have 5 failed webinars. We might think, okay, webinars don't work. So now that literally becomes our reality. We let our experience indoctrinate us into a belief, but the belief is masked as a truth. And then we operate our entire business based on that truth, which isn't even real. So when you look back at your life, it could be things like, I had to go to school. These people are bad. This is good. This is the right way. And if in the easiest way to identify things or a belief is to say like, okay, look at your childhood and how you grew up and the beliefs that are formed from that. And ask yourself, if I was plopped down in like the UK, Australia, Africa, India with a different family, would I still have the beliefs or the version of reality that I have now? And the answer is almost always going to be no. But then we walk down the street and we see a sign that says 25 miles per hour. That's the right way. Like, says who? Like, and then people will literally say, no, the speed limit's 25 miles an hour. I'm like, I can literally drive 50 miles an hour down this road if I want to. Like, there's no limit. And so you start realizing everything is fake and everything's made up. Like even the idea that debt is bad. And I love using this because I remember at one point, this is when we were an affiliate for you for Business by Design. And we had our very first Video 4X launch right after that, like back-to-back launches. And we were in massive growth mode. We were seeing a super amount of success. And I think I invested close to $100,000 in ad spend and team and a lot of this stuff. And I didn't want to use our cash. So I spent $100,000 on credit cards just to pay for it, just to like whatever. And plus I wanted the points, but I got to get the points. But if I was living under this illusion that debt is bad, I wouldn't have done that. I would have invested a lot less. And what I was able to do was able to help me produce $600,000 in revenue between the two launches. Yeah. But I was able to make that decision because the reality of debt is bad didn't exist for me, because I just realized that was just a belief that I was indoctrinated into.
It's so funny you say that too, because I actually just came from looking at another property out here in Sedona, and it's $500,000. I could go buy it right out, and I won't do it because the real estate model we're looking at doesn't make sense. I want the mortgage, so I want to get the loan. So you're in debt, so that I can be profitable on the mortgage every month. Yeah, and it doesn't make sense for me to just spend $500,000 just because I have it. Yeah. And yeah, these are everywhere. And this is the thing I was kind of talking to Brandon before the show. Like I just kind of thought of this term recently, is the ego bond. So as Brandon is sitting here saying everything is an illusion, and I'm sitting here saying everything is a belief, you can disagree all you want. And that kind of also reaffirms it, like everything is belief. It's like, yeah, including what I just said, right? It's a choice. And the real problem is a lot of what people are choosing to see as real or truth has no bearing or support in the goals and outcomes you want. Yeah. Right. It's like saying that I'm a failure and I'm not good enough. And failure is bad, but you want to be successful. So you can keep making these choices about the way things are, but these choices about reality are in direct opposition to the outcomes you want. And so you want to notice when Brandon says something like this, does it start to trigger you a little? Like, do you get a little upset or annoyed? Like, that's not true. I don't, all that kind of stuff that comes up. And this is this kind of interesting phenomenon where when you start going down this route with people where you really want to challenge a lot of stuff, because that's what I do. And Brandon's the same way. We are challengers of your reality. We will challenge your reality for your best interest. And people push back a lot. Why are they pushing back? And this is what I call this ego bond, where you kind of get into this set mold where the cement, this is a metaphor, of course, dries on your perspective of life. You kind of reach this age where you stop seeing the world through the eyes of a young person. Like I'm sure you watch your kids like looking at the world for the first time going, what is all that? You stop doing that. You just say, this is the way the world is. Wow, so inspiring. You should do a TED Talk on that. And then someone offers something different. And at this deep level, it threatens your very existence because of all these decisions that you made about what is true and what is not. And if you could, this is just a crude metaphor I'm offering here. If you could allow that cement mold to be broken, you're free. You're free to see the world from any perspective. You're free to see reality. You're free to see your life, your future, your past, this moment from any of an infinite amount of vantage points. For example, this is just an example. Think of the last time you were in a fight with someone you love. And if you call that to your mind right now, you most likely get an image. You see something. If you're really doing this, like if you were actually like not driving and not operating heavy machinery, and you close your eyes and you could think back to the last time you were in a yelling match with someone you love and you care about. And what do you see? Normally what most people see is they see what they saw when they were experiencing that moment. The question is do you have the ability yet to re-experience that memory through the eyes of the person that you were yelling at? Yeah. And see reality through their eyes? Can you see that same event, that same situation, like a fly on the wall, completely detached? Can you see it, the same situation, the way an alien would see it 100 miles up out in space?
Which do exist, by the way.
Which do exist.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. By the way, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind just came out. What's his name? Stephen Greer, Dr. Stephen Greer's new documentary. Have you seen this one yet?
No.
It's all about how this is his predictions. Mm-hmm. So call us crazy, but just
but that's just
all great minds.
That's just your perception. That's your illusion.
Exactly. All great minds were declared crazy, and in their beginning days, right?
Well, everyone's crazy until you're not, right?
Yeah, exactly. Crazy according to whom?
Yeah.
What's your measuring stick for sanity, really? Just that'll drive you crazy if you really honestly start asking those questions. Anyways, their predictions is that as the next global threat, you will start to hear over the next couple of years that aliens are real, they exist, and they are a threat against us. And he's really, in this documentary, believe what you want, go watch it for yourself, is making the stance of really claiming that and making a case for that aliens do exist, but they're good, and that they are evolved beings that are of pure love consciousness. And they're in the directions that we're going, like talk about our own little growth and hey, look at how much we've grown, Brandon. Talk about doing that for millions of years and evolve to this light being level of pure love. And that's what these beings are that are coming to assist on the planet right now.
Which, by the way, are already here. My belief is, and just because of the experiences I've had, already here, but we just don't have the ability, they're not entering our reality. So
they have the ability to shift from our 3D reality and shift out of it. They don't need to be seen by you.
Yeah. So, and this brings me to the point, what you were just saying before this, is that reality is individualized, but everyone perceives it as it's a collective, where, like you said, you can choose to pick another perspective. You're getting in a fight with your spouse and you're viewing it through that lens. You don't realize that's an individual lens, and there's an infinite amount of other lenses that you could choose to look at it from. And your spouse or whoever you're in the fight with is just looking at it through one different lens. I don't know how many people on this planet, but everyone's operating inside of this planet. Let's just call it 4.2 billion. There's 4.2 billion different realities, all interacting with each other at the same time.
I think it's 7.5, but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And this is powerful. So why I talk about perspective and why I bring up emotions is this is my whole take and experience on emotions. And if you just took anything away as an action item, what to do is start becoming very mindful of your emotional state and begin to notice when you go into, I just had Dr. Joanne Rosenberg on the podcast, and she calls them uncomfortable emotions. I've been originally calling them negative, anger, frustration, sadness, stuff like that. And so when you're in that uncomfortable, not positive emotional state, that's an indicator. That's the byproduct of where your perspective is. And what blew my mind and changed my life, and you get to try this out with for those that are really want to try this on, this is game changer. Step one, you're in this negative emotional state. You get triggered, you get upset, right? And then step number two, you say, what perspective am I holding? And the game changer is this. When you realize the only reason that you're in this negative or uncomfortable emotional state is simply for one reason. You are choosing, because you have free will, right? We have free will here. We have choice.
Yeah.
We can choose our thoughts. We can choose our perspective. That's a choice. That's why we want to break that ego bond. The reason you are feeling this negative emotion is because you are free will choosing a perspective that your higher self, God, or the universe refuses to hold. And that's why we feel that negative emotion, because it's a disconnection from the source that we come from, the bigger part of us.
Makes so much sense.
And our job is just to continue moving back to that source. Every single effing time. You cannot find an exception. When you are in a negative emotional state, it is simply because, and again, I'm not talking about I'm tired or I didn't eat and I'm hungry. I'm talking about feelings, right? Sadness, anger, frustration, shame, right? Is because you have chosen to hold a perspective that is not the same perspective, that is far away from the perspective of God, your creator, source, infinite power of the universe.
Which would be
and,
love.
Well, it's always something of love. I mean, that's our creator. That's the right. Frequency of creation is love.
Yep.
And so it's finding your way back to love. And I'm going to give you an example of this. I talked about this for years, and I'm going to give the shortest version. I went surfing. So, hey, we get to bring surfing into this. And I almost got beat up by a guy in the water. Like, this guy was total, like, just attacked me. He was like ready to physically hurt me. And the guy had a reputation. Okay. He was a bad dude. Okay. He was putting people in the hospital. And now I'm in an altercation with him. So I had to swallow my pride. I had to swallow all that stubbornness and just be like, I'm so sorry, man. Oh, dude. Right. But he was, if we're looking at the right or wrong of things, like, he was out of line. He was completely just being a jerk. He was trying to start something. And I knew I would have lost, and I probably would have died because he would have knocked me unconscious in the water. But the reason I tell this story is because as I left, I was stewing. Like, I couldn't let it go. Hours had passed, but it was still happening in my mind. And I was so angry. And I was angry because I didn't get to speak my mind. You ever, I was like, oh, I just wish I could say what I wish. And then I started getting in shame myself. I'm like, I'm such a coward that I couldn't say what I wanted to say. And what happened was, and I didn't know I was intentionally doing this at the time, but I kept replaying it over and over and over again, this altercation. Like in the movies where the detective is watching the security tape over and over, and then all of a sudden they pause and they go, wait a second, what's that? And I noticed something. He said something that I've never heard anybody say in a situation like that. It's like, did you even see me there? It's like, you don't even give a shit about me. What a weird thing to say. If you really think about that, you don't even give a shit. Why am I supposed to give a shit about you? And that's when I realized, and it was because I was able to shift perspective.
Yeah.
That's his experience of the world, is that no one gives a shit about him.
Yeah.
And as soon as I did that, all of the negative emotion was immediately gone. And I moved from a place of shame and anger, and being lack of pride, like just for total ego bruising, to a place of love and compassion.
Yeah.
And I tell that story because the ending is actually quite sad. He committed suicide about 3 or 4 weeks later. And there you go.
Yeah.
Why did he commit suicide? He was, I think there's a whole tragic story. One of his parents went to prison when he was younger, and he was a single parent, and the parent kind of just abandoned him. And then he went into like a whole life of crime. Yeah. And just start beating people up and putting them in hospital. So his whole version of reality was no one gives a shit about him. It had nothing to do with me. It wasn't about me. That was his whole version. And that's the thing is, like you said, with all the billions of people, we're co-creating and bumping into their things all the time, and as soon as I was able to move, and I could just ask myself, what was the perspective that God, who created both of us, have about him? He's doing the best he can. He's hurt. Yeah. And so what do hurt people do? They hurt others.
Yeah.
And, I could let that go in an instant. I didn't have to, I couldn't focus. I was so angry. I'm just, I let it go. It's over with.
And I love that because this is what we're talking about now. I mean, obviously this is the new Generation Entrepreneur podcast, but this is all stuff that you can use in just daily life. This is stuff that, I bring down to my employees, like the people, like my friends, my family, my wife, when she'll let me and wants to listen. And like, obviously I'm still learning a lot of stuff too. And, but this is stuff that I've really used, like what you're talking about, to really grow and scale the business. And so like, what has been my perspective around failure? What has been my perspective around risk? What's been my emotional state when doing certain things? How am I responding to my team? How am I being a leader for my team? What is their perception inside of here? And then, as you know, understanding that perception and reality is individualized, and you look at your audience and you start to identify what's their perception. How do they see this industry? How do they see this niche? What are their fears, their concerns? And how do we start to shift that from a business standpoint? When you do that with your marketing, you start to stand out, but not stand out, but you start explaining things in ways they've never heard before. You start to shift their reality of stuff they see inside of the business or the niche.
And I love that everything you said was in the form of a question. I just had brain training expert, Jim Quick, on the podcast. Do you know who that is?
No.
Yeah, for 28 years, like he had a injury as a kid, and it like caused a lot of learning disabilities. And today he teaches people like how to increase their potential with their brain, like speed read and all these things. And he said something I loved. I mean, and this is just so true, which is questions are the answer. And when you look at a lot of our self-talk and going through the day, and 90% of it's all autopilot, it's a result of a lot of questions that we're asking. And when you look at your life, because your thoughts create your reality, the life you have right now is the answer to the questions you've been asking. The problem is most people are asking crappy questions. What's wrong with me? Why does this keep happening? Why doesn't anyone like my stuff? Why am I not good enough? Why don't I have what it takes? Why can't I be like that person? What answer do you get when you ask those questions? Because that's what you end up creating. And all you're talking about is asking some better questions that lead you to the direction you want to go.
Yeah.
You know, what does my audience need? How can I help them? What's going to make the difference today? How can I be a better leader? How can I inspire this person? How can I change their life? How can I grow? What can I learn from this? What's my next opportunity? Those are all forward momentum, outcome oriented questions.
Yeah.
And the subconscious mind must answer any question you give it. And it's beautiful. Live in the question. Ask those questions. Richard Bandler, founder of NLP, said the quality of your life is determined by the quality of questions you ask. Most people have a crappy quality life because they're asking crappy quality questions.
Yeah.
I think we can just, start there to shift reality.
Yeah. I love it. Well, James, I appreciate having you on the podcast. The biggest takeaway for me, which I've actually never even heard before, was when we're in a state of like high emotion or emotion we don't want, it's just basically because we're choosing a perspective that, in lack of better words, is not in alignment of where we should be.
Yeah. Because I think that's a real powerful thing.
Yep.
Can we use a real example of that? Can you think of a time? I mean, it can be something from years ago, but like, can you think of a time that you were even in any negative, disempowering, or uncomfortable emotion?
Well, yeah, I mean, I have a perfect one, and I actually use this one as in a story. I tell the story a lot, but it was actually when I first started my business, and my mom, I lived with my in-laws because we were basically broke, and then I would go to my parents lived like a mile down the street, so I'd go to my parents' house and work, and I'd come back, so I would be able to get out of the house sometimes. And every time I would go to their house, my mom would sit there and be like, "Are you sure you want to do this? Why don't you go get a job? Why don't you do this?" And I viewed her as very controlling. And my emotional state was filled with anger. Why is my mom doubting me? All of that stuff. And go ahead.
Okay. So the reason I want to use this as an example, so we can actually create I'm all about steps and processes, right? So step one would be to acknowledge and create awareness, mindfulness. This is like everything. So much. People are just like asleep to their lives. And I think for a lot of people too, going through the whole quarantine and coronavirus, like, a lot of people stopped working and kind of realized how much of a trance that they were in, and kind of waking up to that. So having that awareness, step number one is realizing, okay, I'm in a state of anger, and just noticing the anger is step one.
Yeah.
And then what we do is we'd say, if this were someone else or a coaching client or something, I'd say, where was your attention that was causing the anger? What belief, thought, or perspective were you holding that had you feel that anger? And what would you say if this was something that happened yesterday, not years ago?
I mean, in reference to my mom.
Yes.
I would basically the interpretation or the belief that I chose to have would have been my mom doesn't believe in my ability to grow a business.
Yes, exactly. My mom doesn't believe in me. Okay. Yeah. Now we're gonna go a little further with that because I think there's two things there. Which pretend it was young Brando, which means what about me? My mom doesn't believe in me, therefore that means what about me?
I mean, I don't remember specifically what it could be. Anything like, if my mom doesn't believe in me, then how can I believe in me? Or right. I'm not able to do it.
Then I can't do it, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So that's what's causing the anger.
Yeah.
It's simple, right?
Yep.
Because if a homeless person on the side of the street didn't believe in you, would you get into anger?
No, of course not.
Probably not, right? Why would we care? So that's step two, is identifying the belief, the perspective, or the thought behind it that's causing that emotion. And then step number three would be to acknowledge that if you feel a negative emotion, when you hold that perspective, it must be a lie. That's step three. You have to acknowledge it as a lie. So my mom doesn't believe in me is a lie.
Yep.
So if that's the lie, step number 4, we ask, then what's the truth? What is the perspective that God, source of the universe, holds for us? What is true?
Well, when it shifted everything for me, and this is actually after Landmark. So like Landmark was the first, which you got me to go to Landmark. And so this was the big breakthrough for me at Landmark, was not that my mom didn't believe in me, but it was that my mom is trying to protect her child in the best way she knew how. And that's filled with love. And that comes from a place of love.
And that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. The lie is she doesn't believe in me. The reality is, the truth is that she's just trying to protect you the best way and the only way she knows how.
Yeah.
And then the only step 5 would be, which you already said in step 5, or you already said in step 4, how do you feel when you step into that perspective?
Yeah.
And you feel love? And so if you feel love, that must mean what? That it's true.
Yeah.
This is a simple 5-step process that anybody could use. It's just really hard when you're in an emotional state or you've been triggered or upset to be able to stop and pause. That takes discipline, a lot of discipline.
Yeah.
And when you have that ego bond and you refuse to say, no, it couldn't possibly mean anything else. And you want to fight for those limitations, you want to fight for those lies, you're going to have a really hard time with this. But finding your way, moment by moment, situation by situation, person by person, and event by event, back to love, back to abundance, back to infinite, back to the same perspective that, God, source, creator, and I don't really care what anyone's beliefs are, whatever works for you, back to that perspective, you start to find more of who you truly are.
Yeah.
Start to discover more of your true power, and you start to make life pretty fun and freaking fantastic.
Yeah. 100%. And to finish this off and to relate this even back to business, some ways you guys can use this in business is when you deal with clients, when you deal with someone and like a client's mad at you or they're angry about something or you're trying to sell someone on something, instead of constantly looking at things through your perspective, but look at like, what is the perspective that they possibly had causing them to come up with an objection or to be angry, and to be able to lean into that and shift their perspective to something else can do wonders for your business. It can do wonders for your sales. It can do wonders for your content. So amazing. James, thanks so much for coming on. Where can people go to learn more about you? Where can they go to listen to your podcast and all that good stuff?
Yeah. Wherever you listen to podcasts, we have our podcast up there. It's the Mind Your Business podcast. There are now like 15 different ones, but you'll figure out it's got my ugly mug on it. James Wedmore, Mind Your Business podcast. You can go to mindyourbusinesspodcast.com as well. Or find me over on Instagram, because we always have links to our latest episodes on there. And, have a listen. Have a listen or two.
Yeah.
Why not?
If you loved what we talked about today, you're going to love his podcast. So go check it out. And for all of you guys listening, if you guys enjoyed this episode, you want to support us, I would be extremely grateful for and be very appreciative of any 5-star or any reviews over on iTunes. So with that being said, we'll see you guys on the next episode.